NASA was a lonely, restless bum who resembled a character from Stranger Things and lived a wretched life until he was nearly wiped by a truck. Fortunately, he was saved by a lovely girl who compelled him to marry and smash her. But before that, on the day he was born, his parents unhappily peered down at him in the cradle, realizing that their new baby was ugly as hell, with a round and large head, just like your own. So they chose to call him NASA. Throughout his childhood, everyone mocked him due of his silly name. It became so frustrating for this child that he resolved to study hard in order to become someone whom others would appreciate. He attempted to build muscles by doing push-ups, but discovered that the weight of his watermelon head was pushing him down instead. When he eventually arrived to middle school, he told his useless instructor that he wanted to join the country's greatest institution. Even yet, the teacher reminded him that he needed Einstein's brain, which was unattainable given his deadbeat parents' financial situation. But our guy passionately told her his name was NASA, implying that there were no limits to his dream. The teacher advised him to reconsider his dream and attend another university, but NASA strode out, claiming nothing could stop him. Later that evening, when he walked home, he looked at his exam results and learned he had received A's once more. He whispered to himself, pleased that even life had aligned with his dream. Our useless MC had no idea that life was a two-timing experience, because he just saw the most beautiful girl in the world on the other side of the street. At that point, our determined boy let down his guard because all he wanted was a chance to learn her name. So, he put on his headgear and started crossing the street without thinking. In that moment, he was struck by a truck koan that never misses. The lad lay on the ground, blood splattering everywhere, and all he could think about was dying without learning the name of the hot female. He looked up to see a beautiful girl with blood on her face, staring down at him. The truck driver arrived immediately and inquired as to his well-being. So, with that, the girl stood to leave, but not before begging the truck driver to take NASA to the hospital. The driver pointed out that she would also require medical attention because she had suffered the brunt of the impact when she stepped in front of NASA to save his life. However, the girl started to depart. NASA began to pass out as she left, amid the brilliant moonlight. Shortly after, the truck driver began to call for an ambulance, but NASA abruptly rose up like a horror movie villain, terrifying the truck driver. He informed the driver he was determined to find the girl because she was too beautiful to let go. With that, our boy dashed off into the night at lightning speed to catch up with the female. After a bit of jogging, he caught up with her as she was seated at a bus stop. When she saw him, she was amazed that the person had pursued her despite his life being on the verge of being cut short. At that point, the simp lord desperately threw a cringy pickup line, wondering if she was a star, because he worked with NASA and wanted to study her gravitational influence. Hearing this, the girl was impressed and invited him to sit. She wiped the blood from his cheeks with her handkerchief before handing him her coat. She then rose up and told him she was going to call an ambulance because his injuries meant he may die at any time. But the ugly gorilla, in a desperate attempt to communicate with her, tumbled to the ground. So the female told him his legs were broken. She opened the door, assuring him she would call an ambulance and not to try to move again. NASA's consciousness faded just then, but he remained determined and moved toward her. He told the girl that she resembled Princess Kaguya from the children's story, the cherished princess who was adored by everyone but had to return to the moon. NASA assured the girl that since they might never meet again, he would strive for the opportunity to be with her. With all of his confidence, he told her that he loved her and wanted to go on a date with her. The girl demanded that he marry her in order for them to be together, which he quickly agreed to. He then passed out. Days later, he woke up in the hospital, confined to a wheelchair. He was always thinking about the beautiful girl. He immediately fell into a deep depression because he didn't know the girl's name and would never see her again. Even though he ultimately received the highest grade in his class, he chose not to attend the best university. Instead, he took a service job in the hopes of meeting her again, which never happened. Time passed and NASA turned 18. But instead of enjoying his birthday, he was melancholy and spent the entire day in his bed. However, when his doorbell rang that day, His brain short-circuited when he opened the door to see the girl standing in front of him. The girl introduced herself as Tsukasa. So our child informed her, Misa Swasa. With that, she visited his apartment and, while drinking tea, showed him their marriage certificate and requested him to sign it. Nasa burst into tears since he had never believed she was genuine about the entire marriage business. Tsukasa, on the other hand, assured him that it was fine if he did not want to sign. So he snatched the paper and signed it as rapidly as a ninja in a foot race. She then informed him she was a good judge of character and that she trusted him to take care of her. With that agreed, the two went to the marriage ward office to legally bind it. On the way there, Nasa realized Tsukasa was the only human on the planet who had never made fun of his name. Tsukasa, on the other hand, assured him that NASA had a large number of scientists and engineers working together to realize humanity's dream of space travel. So his name wasn't humorous at all. It was a great name that implied that any dream was possible. Soon after, they arrived at the workplace. The old man was astonished to see a young couple getting married because he was an old, ugly bachelor that no one desired. However, he signed the document and gave them a flower as a gift. Later that night, NASA wandered about his room, still in astonishment that he was now married. He wasn't emotionally prepared to start living with someone, and his flat could only accommodate one person. Then there was a big problem. Where would his new waifu sleep, given that he only had one bed? With that in mind, he considered acquiring a new bed, but it was late and delivery would not arrive until the following day. He began to consider the various postures that might accommodate both of them on the bed. Tsukasa appeared out of nowhere and asked NASA why he was talking to himself like a maniac, which completely surprised him. She then showed him her briefcase, stating that she was there to start their couple life. With that, NASA moved to make her coffee, and she confessed that she didn't have a place to return to, so they would spend every night together from now on. This almost disabled NASA's nerve system. However, she quickly discovered that his bed was too little to accommodate even a rat, so she proposed spending the night at a hotel instead. After hearing this, NASA grew depressed. But Tsukasa told him that, even though his living conditions were worse than those of a homeless beggar, she was his wife and would never abandon him. NASA glanced at her, perplexed as to why a beautiful woman would want to spend the rest of her life with a terrible loser like him, especially when he had done nothing for her. So he questioned Tsukasa why she had opted to marry him, given how little they know each other. Tsukasa said that the question was stupid, and then inquired why he had consented to marry her without knowing her. NASA explained that it was because he loved her. Tsukasa responded that she would not marry someone she did not love. After that, she stood up to depart for the hotel, but NASA chased her down and begged her to stay, offering to do all in his power to get a futon, even if it meant walking to the end of the earth. However, deep down, our boy had a feeling that if the chick departed, she might never return to his dingy flat. Tsukasa agreed, so they went to the nearest convenience store to acquire a mattress and a futon. Tsukasa was astonished to discover that her boy husband knew more about the various sorts of futons than the producers themselves. Tsukasa then took his hand, and the miserable simp forgot everything depressing. They spent several hours shopping together. Hours later, they returned to the flat, and Tsukasa discovered that the mattress was quite comfortable. NASA, on the other hand, couldn't believe that a hot baddie was sleeping in his bedroom. Tsukasa looked about for a bathroom, but realized the young man didn't have one. So NASA told her that he used the local bathroom every morning. She recommended they go for a walk to get the items from the convenience store. NASA eventually arrived with a bundle of female supplies. Tsukasa changed into pajamas. When NASA saw her, he did a spit take because he realized she was beautiful even in pajamas. Later that night, NASA switched out the light and they went to bed. However, NASA found it impossible to sleep because he knew a girl was sleeping so near to him for the first time in his life, making his heart race quicker than a hyena on steroids. He recognized his wife was a restless sleeper, so he put her back into bed and considered giving her a goodnight kiss, but he worried the kiss would be imperfect because she wasn't conscious. Tsukasa rose up and sleepwalked into the kitchen to get water. When she returned, she removed his cover, leaving him chilly till the following morning. Nasa awoke the next morning, convinced that everything that had happened the day before was a dream. But when he watched Tsukasa act as if she had no recall of what happened the night before, he understood he was indeed married. Just as Tsukasa started taking off her pajamas, he cried for her to remember she wasn't alone. Then he moved to the other room to give her some privacy. When he returned, he found Tsukasa dressed in an apron, questioning why Nasa was talking to her in such a formal manner, since they were married. So they both agreed to give each other pet names, which caused Tsukasa flush and her face get crimson. Tsukasa later discovered Nasa's refrigerator, which was well organized and full of food. She was amazed that the guy could cook. Unlike other Gen Z males who rely on takeout, Nasa informed her that he conducted a rigorous examination of an adult male's nutritional demands and discovered that eating hot pot every day was the key to a healthy existence. Tsukasa, on the other hand, commented that cooking was not chemistry and then executed a Michelin-style culinary move. She prepared an Instagram-worthy lunch that was considerably superior to Nasa's standard hot pot. When he tried the food, he knew the girl could cook. Tsukasa then stated that she could cook almost anything as long as she had the ingredients. After eating, Tsukasa inquired about the bathhouse, and Nasa realized he hadn't showered in some days. He was just thinking about how lovely it would be to see Tsukasa without plot armor. Nasa only had basic bathing goods, so they headed to the convenience store to acquire some skin cream and toner. Nasa was taken aback by the variety of bathing products available, as he had previously just used soap. Finally, they got at the bathhouse, where they encountered Kaname, a Nasa classmate. Kaname was surprised to see Nasa with a female because she had assumed his meat would be donated to a museum for lack of use. Next, Nasa introduced Kaname to Tsukasa. Kaname had been maintaining the bathhouse for years to support her family. Suddenly, she spotted Nasa and Tsukasa's strange chemistry and inquired as to their relationship status. Nasa then added that they were married, which stopped the girl's heart for a moment and led her to faint. She did, however, congratulate them on their marriage and offer them free baths as a house gift. Tsukasa entered to take a bath, while Nasa dragged along until Kaname stopped him with her broom. She told him she never imagined he'd marry, because she expected he'd stay unmarried until he was 70 and become a magician. She then inquired as to when the wedding ceremony would take place, but Nasa awkwardly stated that weddings were now a waste of money. Kaname chastised him for not being man enough to satisfy his girlfriend. She told him it was his obligation to make her happy. So, with flaming eyes, Nasa resolved to make his wife happy for the rest of his life because he loved her. Tsukasa overheard him and was a little embarrassed that the guy was shouting love on the street like a crazy. Later, Nasa took his bath and reflected on how fortunate he would be if he could only see his wife in her full magnificence. Kaname appeared out of nowhere and mocked him about having a very small willy. Tsukasa, on the other hand, entered the bathing parlor only to find it vacant, so she decided to spend some quiet time soaking alone. However, her alone time was cut short by Aya, the family's oldest sister, who mistakenly entered the bath and then apologized repeatedly like a crazy person for invading her private. Aya then offered to assist wash Tsukasa's back to demonstrate her sincere apologies. As she bathed Tsukasa's back, she complimented her silky skin, comparing it to silk, and then an iPhone X, but quickly apologized for comparing her skin to trivial things. Following that, they both introduced themselves, and Aya was taken aback when she found Tsukasa shared Nasa's surname. She inquired whether Tsukasa was a relative or family member, to which he lied, claiming that she was his younger sister. Several hours later, Nasa had a dream about meeting Tsukasa. However, he was jolted out of his nap when Tsukasa woke him up to say she was finished showering. Aya then approached them, informing Nasa that she had met his younger sister, which bewildered him. However, he decided to play along by pretending Tsukasa was his younger sister. Tsukasa, on the other hand, inquired as to how Aya knew Nasa, to which Aya replied that they had been classmates. She went on to say that her grandfather, who had run the firm, had died years ago, leaving the situation to deteriorate. However, Thanks to NASA, who employed his marketing talents obtained from YouTube, they were able to resurrect the business. Soon later, NASA and Tsukasa returned to the house. Tsukasa then asked NASA if Aya was lovely, and the ignorant moron yapped on and on about how adorable the girl was, unaware that it made Tsukasa very jealous. While walking, they came upon a marriage ceremony, and NASA spotted Tsukasa experiencing a horrible mood swing. He remembered Kanemi's statements about how a marriage without a ceremony was terrible. With that, he assumed Tsukasa was upset because they hadn't had a wedding ceremony when all the girl wanted was for him to congratulate her, like he had with Aya. She told him she only wanted to be pretty. So the naive donkey handed her the key to the apartment and left, saying he would make the impossible happen. Tsukasa was perplexed as she watched him flee, wondering how difficult it had been for him to simply tell her she was beautiful. Tsukasa returned to the flat a few minutes later, feeling lonely. She wondered when NASA will return. Meanwhile, she decided to practice her domestic abilities by cleaning the house, but she soon noticed it was already spotless. So she considered cleaning the closet and beneath the bed, as those areas are rarely cleaned. She restrained herself, assuming her husband had some nasty mags stashed within. She heard the doorbell ring and answered it to find a yellow-haired girl named Chitose. Chitose quickly made fun of the substandard flat, claiming that her kennel was way superior. Tsukasa closed the door on her nasty face. The yellow-haired dwarf began beating on the door, claiming she had come to fetch her up after her grandma became concerned about her unexpected departure. Tsukasa then informed her that she was now married and would never return, ever, and closed the door. Chitose exited the apartment with sadness and sobbed on the stairs. NASA spotted her crying and attempted to console her. Chitose related to him her concern with a family member who had fled. She described Tsukasa as a free-flying glass butterfly who was easily harmed and would vanish the moment you allowed her out of sight. Tsukasa overheard their chat just as she heard NASA's voice. Chitose was enraged when she learned that the guy she had been talking to all along was the moron who married Tsukasa. NASA then tried to be the cool guy, assuring her that he was the perfect partner for Tsukasa. But Chitose snatched him without hesitation and drove him all the way to a mansion. Inside the home, she informed NASA that she would frame him with damning photographs. She then summoned two sexy maids, Charlotte and Aurora, and asked them to take bizarre images of NASA. When Charlotte heard this, she immediately stripped, but Chitose swiftly covered her up and told her to cool. While they were talking, NASA took advantage of the opportunity to flee and investigate his surroundings. He found himself in a room and, sniffing the air like a police dog, concluded it belonged to Tsukasa. Just then, he noticed a rock on display. He recognized the shape and substance, and realized it was a moon rock. He pondered how Tsukasa had obtained a moon rock, given that they were museum-worthy treasures. Charlotte came into the chamber, holding a massive sword capable of cutting through the firmament of heaven, promising to destroy him for trespassing. However, when attempting to separate NASA's ugly head from his body, she accidentally smacked the moon rock's glass container, nearly destroying it and allowing nitrogen to leak. NASA demonstrated his electrical talents and mended it. A few minutes later, Chitose revealed that it was Tsukasa's gift to the family and was surprised to learn how little he knew about his wife. She remembered how Tsukasa had saved her when mountain climbing when they were kids, and she was furious that Tsukasa had married this idiot. Charlotte started the infidelity plan right away, while Aurora shot images and photoshopped them like a pro. NASA was taken aback when he saw the photoshopped photos and realized how quickly the girl created them. At that point, Tsukasa entered the room and discovered the images. Chitose instantly advised her to divorce the awful, deceitful man. But Tsukasa requested a private talk with her husband, which was only a ruse to flee. Outside, NASA apologized for the photos and claimed that he had been framed. Tsukasa, on the other hand, told him she wasn't dumb and could tell the photographs were photoshopped. Meanwhile, Chitose and her nasty maids realized they'd been duped and attempted to stop them. At the same time, Tsukasa disclosed a secret path leading to an old church. NASA seized the opportunity to propose to her there. He declared his undying love and kissed her for the first time. Tsukasa was in the mood to watch TV the next day at home, but she learned her broke husband didn't even own one. Even worse, he knew nothing about movies or television, leaving her wondering what he had been doing his entire life. She planned to give him a passionate TED Talk about how important TV is in the life of the typical otaku. Nasa was astonished to learn that his usually laid-back wife was a fiery vixen when it came to movies. So they went television shopping. Tsukasa advised they get an inexpensive one because she would be satisfied anyway. Later that day at the bathhouse, Nasa announced to Kaname that he had proposed to Tsukasa. Kaname then inquired as to whether he had purchased a ring for the proposal, to which the ugly fool revealed that he had never considered obtaining a ring to be important. Hearing this, Kaname erupted in rage, telling him that a ring was one of the top 3 things every husband should acquire for his wife. While waiting for Tsukasa to finish her bath, Nasa watched television and saw a couple wearing a diamond ring to celebrate their engagement. He pondered what a diamond ring would cost. Later, on their way home, he told Tsukasa that he was going to work that afternoon. They stopped at a park before returning home and calmly observed the scenery. Nasa wondered if Tsukasa was unhappy since she'd be alone while he went to work. This led him to the conclusion that he needed to acquire her a diamond ring so she could remember him even when he wasn't home. Tsukasa had dinner ready when he returned home that evening. While they ate, Nasa recommended they get a diamond engagement ring to symbolize their devotion. Hearing this, Tsukasa was taken aback by his loving behavior. However, she reminded him that they were already married, so receiving an engagement ring would be unusual. All they needed was a wedding ring. She understood then that Nasa was a brain-dead moron who didn't understand the difference. With that, she taught him the distinction between an engagement band and a wedding ring. Nasa was more sure than ever before that she needed a diamond wedding ring. Tsukasa tried to explain that a diamond ring would cost an arm and a leg, but Nasa, stubborn as a goat, insisted on having one. Knowing that her words would not penetrate his thick head, she decided it was best if he found out for himself. So the following day, she took him to a diamond ring shop. Nasa was embarrassed to learn how pricey diamond rings were. The salesperson said that the rings were pricey because they were of the greatest quality and represented a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Nasa was persuaded and was going to spend his parents' cash on one, but Tsukasa pulled him away before he could. She stated that she merely intended to demonstrate him how expensive diamond rings were, not ask him to spend all of his family's savings on one. However, Nasa remained adamant, so Tsukasa led him to a lower-quality store. Nasa was surprised to see that the costs were significantly lower than the first shop. However, Tsukasa believed they were still too expensive, so they left the store. Thank you for watching to this point. This is not the end. For part 2, don't forget to like and subscribe. We got other interesting anime recaps for you. Choose the left or the right video.